Sorry about that, I ran out of memory. Well, as to the visit, Lucy was more cheerful than on the day I first saw her, and certainly looked better. She had lost something of the ghastly look that so upset you, and her breathing was normal. She was very sweet to the professor, as she always is, and tried to make him feel at ease, though I could see that the poor girl was making a hard struggle for it. I believe Van Helsing saw it too, for I saw the quick look under his bushy brows that I knew of old. Then he began to chat of all things except ourselves and diseases, and with such an infinite geniality that I could see poor Lucy's pretense of animation merge into reality. Then, without any seeming change, he brought the conversation gently around to his visit, and suavely said, "My dear young miss, I have the so great pleasure, because you are so much beloved. That is much, my dear. Everywhere there that which I do not see. They told me you were down in spirit, and that you were of ghastly pale. To them I say, poof!" And he snapped his fingers at me and went on. "But you and I shall show them how wrong they are. How can he," and he pointed at me with the same look and gesture as that with which once he pointed me out to his class, on, or rather after, a particular occasion which he never fails to remind me of, "know anything of young ladies? He has his madams to play with, and to bring them back to happiness, and to those that love them. It is much to do, and oh, but there are rewards, in that we can bestow such happiness. But the young ladies, he has no wife nor daughter, and the young do not tell themselves to the young, but to the old, like me, who have known so many sorrows and the causes of them. So, my dear, we will send him away to smoke the cigarette in the garden, whilst you and I have a little talk all to ourselves." I took the hint and strolled about, and presently the professor came to the window and called me in. He looked grave, but said, "I have made careful examination, but there is no functional cause. With you I agree that there has been much blood loss. It has been, but is not. But the conditions of her are in no way anemic. I have asked her to send me her maid, and I may just one or two question, that so I may not chance to miss anything. I know well what she will say, and yet there is cause. There is always cause for everything. I must go back home and think. You must send to me the telegram every day, and if there be cause, I shall come. Again, the disease, for not to be all well as a disease, interests me, and the sweet young dear, she interests me too. She charmed me, and for her, if not for you or disease, I come." As I tell you, he would not say a word more, even when we were alone, and so now, Art, you know all I know. I shall keep stern watch. I trust your poor father is rallying. It must be a terrible thing to you, my dear old fellow, to be placed in such a position between two people who are both so dear to you. I know your idea of duty to your father, and you are right to stick to it. But if need be, I shall send you word to come at once to Lucy. So do not be over anxious unless you hear from me." Dr. Seward's Diary, 4th September. Zoophagous patient still keeps our interest in him. He had only one outburst, and that was yesterday, at an unusual time. Just before the stroke of noon, he began to grow restless. The attendant knew the symptoms, and at once summoned aid. Fortunately, the men came at a run, and were just in time, for at the stroke of noon he became so violent that it took all their strength to hold him. In about 5 minutes, however, he began to get more and more quiet, and finally sank into a sort of melancholy, in which state he has remained up to now. The attendant tells me that his screams whilst in the paroxysm were really appalling. I found my hands full when I got in, attending to some of the other patients who were frightened by him. Indeed, I can quite understand the effect, for the sounds disturbed even me, though I was some distance away. It is now after the dinner hour of the asylum, and as yet my patient sits in a corner brooding, with a dull, sullen, woebegone look in his face, which seemed rather to indicate than to show something directly. I cannot quite understand it. Later, another change in my patient. At 5 o'clock I looked in on him, and found him seemingly as happy and contented as he used to be. He was catching flies and eating them, and he was keeping note of his capture by making nail marks on the edge of the door between the ridges of padding. When he saw me, he came over and apologized for his bad conduct, and asked me, in a very humble, cringing way, to be led back to his own room and to have his notebook again. I thought it well to humor him, so he is back in his room with the window open. He has the sugar of his tea spread out on the window-sill, and is reaping quiet a harvest of flies. He is not now eating them, but putting them into a box, as of old, and is already examining the corners of his room to find a spider. I tried to get him to talk about the past few days, for any clue to his thoughts would be of immense help to me, but he would not rise. For a moment or two he looked very sad, and said in a sort of far-away voice, as though saying it rather to himself than me, all over, he deserted me. No hope for me now unless I do it for myself." Then suddenly turning to me in a resolute way, he said, "Doctor, won't you be very good to me and let me have a little more sugar? I think it would be good for me." "And the flies?" I said. "Yes, the flies like it too, and I like the flies, therefore I like it. And there are people who know so little as to think that madmen do not argue." I procured him a double supply, and left him as happy a man as, I suppose, any in the world. I wish I could fathom his mind. Midnight, another change in him. I had been to see Miss Westerna, whom I found much better, and had just returned, and was standing at our own gate, looking in the sunset, when once more I heard him yelling. As his room is on this side of the house, I could hear it better than in the morning. It was a shock to me to turn from the wonderful smoky beauty of a sunset over London, with its lurid lights and inky shadows, and all the marvellous tints that come on the foul clouds, even as on foul water, and to realize all the grim sternness of my own cold stone building, with its wealth of breathing misery, and my own desolate heart to endure it all. I reached him just as the sun was going down, and from his window saw the red disk sink. As it sank, he became less and less frenzied, and just as it dipped, he slid from the hands that held him, an inert mass, on the floor. It is wonderful, however, what intellectual reproductive power lunatics have, for within a few minutes he stood up quite calmly, and looked around him. I signaled to the attendants not to hold him, for I was anxious to see what he would do. He went straight over to the window and brushed out the crumbs of sugar. Then he took his fly box and emptied it outside, and threw away the box. Then he shut the window, and crossing over, sat down on his bed. All this surprised me, so I asked him, "Are you not going to keep the flies any more?" "No," he said, "I am sick of all that rubbish." He certainly is a wonderfully interesting study. I wish I could get some glimpse of his mind, or of the cause of his sudden passion. Stop. There may be a clue after all. If we can find why today his paroxysms came on at high noon and at sunset, can it be that there is a malign influence of the sun at periods which affects certain matters, as at times the moon does others? We shall see. Telegram, Seward, London to Van Helsing, Amsterdam. 4th September. Patient still better today. Telegram, Seward, London to Van Helsing. 5th September. Patient greatly improved. Good appetite, sleeps naturally, good spirits, color coming back. Seward to Van Helsing. September 6th. Terrible change for the worse. Come at once. Do not lose an hour. I hold over telegram to Holmwood till have seen you. And the end.